Hello there. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the sixth and final part of Margaret Anderson's The Unknowable Gurdjieff and our first live project here at the Four Ideals channel, the new channel, The Four Ideals, inspired by Gurdjieff and the world's religions. And up to this point, really, this is the main new content that I've shared, if you like. Much of what is on the channel is historical. The videos that people found valuable over at Book Club about Gurdjieff, the man, his ideas, the system, and the Gurdjieff work. And so I'm nearly coming to the end of that historical upload. And also, if you are missing any of the Gurdjieff books that we used to read over at Book Club, I have backed them all up and saved the files and am beginning to upload them onto the Patreon Book Club app, particularly at the moment Idiots in Paris and The Fourth Way with the text. And of course here we're working through, I think we're up to book 6 of Plato's Republic. So lots going on across both channels. Now this channel will be for Gurdjieff ideas and content, and also religious unification, syncretism, perennialism, and all of these things. But we may read some random books. And with that being said, the next book that we'll read is going to be Rudyard Kipling's Kim, but it's a rather long book. So I think I will do a poll with the next Gurdjieff book to read, and reading all of the names in this book from Margaret Anderson, I think The Women of the Rope might be a good choice. But there are many that we have left to read. We are not short of a few books here at the Four Ideals, and I will have lots to speak and share with you moving forward. So if that sounds interesting for you, do like the video, subscribe to the channel, maybe share the show on your social media, or if you've got some like-minded acquaintances and colleagues interested in spirituality, waking up, Gurdjieff in general, and religious unification. And don't forget, I have my own publication, Awakening the Machine, that you can find at Amazon or at the, where is it? Where's the digital version? Stan Store, I think. stanstore.lewiskirk. I'm good at this marketing business, you see. And hello there, IOP VXV says, greetings one and all. Hello there, everyone watching and listening. It's good to be with you. And we've got the final 3 chapters of The Unknowable Gurdjieff, the first of which is Chapter 9, Apartment in Paris. And if you remember from Idiots in Paris, this is going to cover the same sort of time period. Idiots in Paris is 48-49, the last year of Gurdjieff's life. And I believe this is around the same time period. And as I always say, if you read the Bennett's account, Margaret Anderson's account, then you'll have an omnidirectional view, let's say. But enough waffle. Let's get to the reading. Chapter 9, Apartment in Paris. In June 1948, all of us who had been stranded in America during the war returned to France and to Gurdjieff. Paris was not the same. It was lovelier. There were fewer people in the streets. This air, this stone, this earth, this water, all were more visible and conspired to break the heart. Gurdjieff's small, dingy, familiar apartment in the Rue des Colonels Renard had not changed. Details of destruction only emphasized its changelessness. The colors had faded, the furniture was shabbier, the dining room carpet had worn through and now had big patches on it. 9 years and a war had brought new people to the remembered table, but their quest was the old quest, the same as ours. The pictures on the wall were new, but they had the same quality as the old ones. Everything but art, as Jane had said long ago. All was as it had been, including the presence, as always, of a stranger who was seeing Gurdjieff for the first time. And we were all there again together, except for Georgette. The newest newcomer was Dorothy Caruso, and Georgette LeBlanc died in 1941. And if you remember that, we read a passage from Georgette LeBlanc's book, her memoirs. And hello there. Graham Fortune says, hi, y'all. And Sophia. Hi there, Sophia. Great to connect with you again over the airwaves. Sophia says, greetings from New York, everyone, and welcome, Sophia. And it's almost like the old community is coming back together. I've been in contact with Voldemar Wagner, so hopefully we'll see him at some point. But it's lovely to be with you all. Gurdjieff himself seemed to me unchanged. He was a little older, he was a little tired, but he was still as lavish as ever with his existence and his ceremony. He sat at the side of the table instead of at the end, and he was more silent than in the years before. But there was teaching in all that he did or said, only its form had changed. He was teaching now chiefly through his presence, from his being, he might have said. A stranger might have thought he was unconscious of what was taking place around him, but we were alert to his awareness of everyone's words and gestures, to his monosyllabic indications of type and tendency. We listened with all our force to his rapid or elaborated, terse or kindly criticism of human egoism. He let no slight failing pass without signal or correction. Most of the old pupils felt that he was gentler than in the old years. I could only feel that his weariness with the human condition had reached the breaking point. But we knew that he would fulfill to the end his obligation to life. Hello there, Jean Harris, and welcome. There were now so many new pupils, English and American and French, that he transmitted much of his instruction through a person we had known in the old priory days. After years of work with him, her stature was now visible to everyone. Her name was Jean de Salzman. We lunched with him every day and usually returned for dinner at 9. Before every meal, one of his older pupils read from Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. Late one afternoon in July, Dorothy and I were having tea in the park between the American Embassy and the Champs-Élysées. A group of chattering people sat at the table next to ours, and nothing could have been more startling than to hear in such a place, in such a group, the name of Gurdjieff. A best-dressed man was repeating the usual distractions, calumnies that one is accustomed to hear when the unknowing talk of Gurdjieff. Don't say anything, Dorothy begged. It's useless. Let's just go. As we left, I lingered behind her and stopped before the group and spoke in a slow, quiet voice. May I say, in passing, that none of the things you've been saying about Gurdjieff is true? There was a loud silence, then a burst of unsure laughter from one of the women. I walked on, and all the way up the Champs-Élysées I breathed deep breaths of pleasure and triumph. Some time later I was told that one of the group had gone to Madame de Salzman to ask what Gurdjieff was really like. During 1948 and 1949 we saw Gurdjieff almost continuously, and Dorothy has written of her experience in her book Dorothy Caruso, A Personal History, Hermitage House Publications. Her story too differs from all others. It is told simply, without the slightest intellectual pretension. And there, Margaret Anderson is alluding again how every book that we read about Gurdjieff differs from all others. All the texts, all of the accounts and memoirs and recollections differ from all the others, naturally, because, of course, different essence, different being, and I'm sure some personality coming through. It began with our meeting on the SS Drottningholm in 1942, when we were returning to New York after having lived through almost 2 years of war in France. And a quote from Dorothy's book, quote, June 1942. I was returning after an absence of 10 transilient years to New York, a gigantic city filled with strangers and forgotten friends that once had been my home and was my home no longer. I faced the future without plan or purpose. After my rapturous past and my astonishing present, all that I had to look forward to was a life of ease and emptiness. 3 tenses, defined and flat and narrow as ribbons. Could that be all there was to life, to everyone's life? There must be another tense, a 4th, without a name. When I tried to follow my thought to its conclusion, it wavered away, dimmed and disappeared, like a star that is lost when you look at it directly. I remember the night in Paris years ago when something had come close, the shadow of a mystery. Now I perceived the faint form behind the shadow. Then all at once the whole thought vanished. There was no 4th tense, or star, or mystery. No wonderful experience was waiting for me anywhere. A return to reason in a dreaded world would be my only experience. And now we move on to, I believe it's the same book, Dorothy's book, and maybe we're going to quote from that at length, it looks like. So Margaret Anderson sort of recounts and shares other people's writings in her books, which is fine, of course. So I think all of this chapter maybe is from Dorothy Caruso, A Personal History, so a conversation. I was wrong. 2 nights later on the ship, 24 hours out of New York, I sat unconscious of time and sea, conscious only of a conversation. In darkness, on a deserted deck, I looked up into the black, unmoving sky and listened to words that lighted the universe. They were words that contained thoughts of such power and abstraction, such virtue and vastness, that I sat speechless, overwhelmed by the magnitude of ideas of a kind I had never heard. All my own thoughts, all my uneasy, unsuccessful efforts to create within my troubled mind a mental chart that I could follow towards what I hoped would be a wonderful experience, became puerile, pitiful, in the face of an immense unknown world that was opening before me. It reached far beyond the mind, and yet was a part of it, or the mind a part of its immensity. In my flash of understanding, the words I was hearing were consumed, forgotten forever, and I saw instead a way of life, a road as clear, as straight as the road I saw in that instant when I looked at Enrico Caruso from the top of a flight of stairs. At 2 o'clock I went to my cabin. The children were waiting for me. "Something has happened to me," I said. "I have heard things tonight that may change the course of our lives." The person who made this conversation was Margaret Anderson. But I could not repeat the words I had heard. Even today I cannot remember a single phrase of that conversation. It had to do with a system of knowledge concerning man's relation to God and the universe, as taught by a man called Gurdjieff. He lived in Paris and for many years had been teaching there. From a name and an outline of an unknown doctrine, there arose for me a total vision of a new world. What was important now was how soon I and my children could enter this world. And suddenly I realized, as if through revelation, that on this night, on a ship sailing towards New York, I had come at last within sight of a land I had sought since childhood. The magnitude of the revelation, the quality of the disclosure, and the immensity of its effect upon me erased from my mind all dread of the future. Nothing could ever take from me this night's apperception of a new world, and my only wish was to meet the man called Gurdjieff, who had explored to its limits this unknown world, who had travelled all the way along its roads and welcomed all those in need who came to him to learn. Chez Gurdjieff, Paris, June 1948. So still Dorothy. In spite of all I had been told, I had made my own conception of Gurdjieff. He would have the tongue of St. John, the inspiration of St. Paul, the sanctity of and remoteness of the Reverend Mother. I would be filled with awe and exultation, and when I left it would be with a high sense of humility for the privilege of having met him. It was in this fervent and expectant state that I entered his Paris flat in the Rue des Colonels Renard on the last day of June. But when I saw Gurdjieff, all my preconceived ideas vanished, for I saw an old man grey with weariness and illness, yet whose strength of spirit emanated with such force from his weakened body that, save for a sense of fierce protection, I felt no deep emotion at all. I could not understand his English. His low voice and muffled Asiatic accent formed syllables that had no meaning to me, and at the same time I realized that at this moment ordinary speech was unimportant. It was as if we had already spoken and were continuing to speak, but in a language without sound. There were 20 pupils lunching with him that first day. Except for an occasional low murmur, they sat in silence, watchful, unsmiling. When Gurdjieff spoke, they sat up straighter, tensed as if their backbones had suddenly solidified. He sat relaxed with one foot folded under him on a divan opposite us, slowly eating morsels of lamb and hard bits of goat's cheese and fresh tarragon leaves with his fingers. His eyebrows rose above his lowered lids when a murmur reached him, but he did not turn his head to look. He seemed to see without looking. At the end of the meal he began to talk. I scarcely understood a word, but I was galvanized to a zenith of attention. Every expression of his face and each small movement of his body I found heartbreaking. I thought, the kind of force he is using is wearing him out. Why must he go on doing it? Why do they let him? We should go home. We should not ask this tired man for anything. But as we left, he said, "You come tonight for reading at 9 o'clock, then dinner after." I thanked him, told him I thought he was too tired. I might have been speaking with one of my children instead of to a man of 81, a magus, a possessor of super knowledge. I sat in the corner of the salon before dinner, listening to a chapter from his manuscript read aloud, an expressionless voice going on, pupils seated on the floor, motionless and intense. The next night I listened again, and the night after, day after day and night after night, I listened to that unimpassioned voice and watched those immobile faces, some with open, unseeing eyes, some with eyes closed. There was no continuity in the reading. Chapters read the week before were repeated the following week, or sometimes a chapter read half through was never resumed. After a while my attention wandered, but that of the pupils on the floor did not. The concentration of those motionless bodies began to irritate me. What were they concentrated on? Surely not on the manuscript, which they must have heard 100 times. Perhaps they were reflecting on the great ideas of Gurdjieff, but I couldn't detect ideas in the allegory of Beelzebub's tales to his grandson that was being read aloud. I'm sure we all share that similar experience of our first hearing or reading of Beelzebub. A month passed. I had learned to understand Gurdjieff's broken English, but I had not once heard him present a great idea. I was told that he was no longer teaching through ideas as he had done at the Priory 25 years before, but I could in no way relate the man I saw every day to the mystic Gurdjieff I had heard about from Margaret on a boat 6 years ago. Of course he talked, but chiefly of countries and nationalities, and always in a large derogatory way, as repetitious and boring as the readings, or else he scolded the pupils who prepared the food. He spoke harshly and, I thought, unjustly. I felt it was humiliating to be reprimanded before everyone. Usually the pupil remained quiet, but when, during the tirade, he dared to defend himself, Gurdjieff's voice grew angrier and louder, and his eyes flashed. Then, at the peak of rage, he suddenly smiled, relaxed, and said, "Bravo!" and offered the culprit his favourite sweet. Why? What had all this to do with the universe and man and his immortality? And if those pupils seated on the floor during the interminable readings were not pretending, what then were they thinking with their lost, rapt faces? I had brought my body into a world of thought. I was an alien in an incomprehensible world. Self-conscious and bewildered, I sat in my corner listening, trying to understand. At last the day came when I told Margaret that I had had enough. It was useless for me to go on seeing Gurdjieff. I might as well fly back to America. I'm not learning anything. He isn't teaching anything. What is there to learn? Just listening to that book, watching the others who never speak to me, whose names I don't even know, and watching Gurdjieff eat or play that little organ. I'm going home. You must do as you think best, Margaret said. She neither urged me to stay nor seemed concerned about my going. For 5 days I stayed away. Then I went back to Gurdjieff. I went back because he had been so kind to me. He hadn't railed at me or frightened me. Indeed, at our third meeting, he had said, apropos of nothing, it seemed to me, "Inside you are a rabbit." I had wondered at the time how he knew. I still wondered. Another reason for going back was a conventional one. I had dined with him every night for a month. It was boorish to leave without saying goodbye or thanking him. Besides, I had missed him more each day I stayed away. After all, if he wasn't teaching in the way I had expected, perhaps he was teaching in another way. He did not reproach me for my absence. He simply smiled and pretended to be surprised to see me. And at the crowded table, he even teased me a little about my size. It was a warm and vibrant welcome, and during lunch I felt a glow as if there had been established between us a new and special bond, a kind of unspoken, sympathetic understanding. After lunch he invited me to have coffee with him in his storeroom. There, in the midst of fruits and sweets and wines, with slender sausages of camel's meat, bunches of scarlet peppers and sprays of rosemary and mint suspended like a canopy above, as I watched him pouring coffee out of the battered old thermos bottle, I suddenly felt as young and trustful as I had felt when Mother Thompson watched over me in the convent. Years of worldly experience fell away, and I was a child again. Gurdjieff offered me a piece of sugar. You want to ask him some... Gurdjieff offered me a piece of sugar. You want to ask me something, he said. I didn't want to ask him anything. I wanted to tell him something, but I was unprepared for this direct and simple opening. I could not quickly think of any abstract or esoteric question, so instead I blurted out what had troubled me ever since I had been going to his house. Everyone here seems to have a soul except me. Haven't I any soul? He didn't answer immediately or look at me. He took a piece of sugar, put it into his mouth and sipped some coffee through it. Then he said, "You know what means consciousness?" "Yes," I said. "It means to know something." "No, not to know something, to know yourself, your I. You not know your I for 1 second in your whole life. Now I tell you, try. But very difficult. You remember, say, I am, once every hour. You not succeed, but no matter. Try. You understand? At this first interview I said none of the things I had planned to say. Instead I told him about my childhood in my father's house, of the goodness of Enrico and my despair when he died, and about my children and how deeply I loved them. And then I said, I don't know anything about the things all the others know. I don't even know what to ask you. What can I do when I have nothing to start from? What shall I do? You must help your father, Gurdjieff said. I thought he had not understood that I had spoken too quickly, so I told him again that my father was dead. I know, you tell already, but because of your father you are here. Have gratitude for this. You are your father and you owe to him. He is dead, too late to repair for himself. You must repair for him. Help him. But how can I help him when he's dead? Where is he? All around you. You must work on yourself. Remember what I tell, your I. And what you do for yourself, you also do for me. He said no more, but I felt as if he had spoken great things and not in ordinary words, and when I felt it was with something rich and strange and full of meaning. No matter how late each night in the salon after dinner, Gurdjieff took his little accordion piano on his knee and, while his left hand worked the bellows, his right hand made music in minor chords and haunting single notes. But one night in his aromatic storeroom, he played for 5 of us, alone, a different kind of music, although whether the difference lay in its sorrowful harmonies or in the way he played, I do not know. I only know that no music had ever been so sad. Before it ended, I put my head on the table and wept. What had happened to me? What has happened to me, I said. When I came into this room I was happy, and then that music, and now I am happy again. I play objective music to make cry, Gurdjieff said. There are many kinds such music, some to make laugh, or to love, or to hate. This the beginning of music, sacred music, 2,000-3,000 years old. Your church music comes from such, but they don't realize, they have forgotten. This is temple music, very ancient. Once when he played, I thought the music sounded like a prayer. It seemed to supplicate. And then I thought, it is only my imagination and my emotion. And I tried not to feel what I was feeling. But when he had finished, instead of smiling and tapping the top of the instrument with his hand, he sat quite still, and his eyes stood motionless, as if he were looking at us through his thoughts. Then he said, "It is a prayer," and left us. Hello there, Flibbity Gibbets. Welcome, and it's good to be back with you, my friend. How are you? How are you? Mr. Thompson, if I remember. Midsummer. So still, we're still reading from, who's this? I can't remember. We're still reading from Dorothy Caruso. And hello there, Mike Hayden. Mike Hayden from Wales. Whereabouts in Wales, Mike? And hello and welcome. Midsummer. Gurdjieff was leaving by car with some of his pupils to take the bath at Vichy. I was happy to be free for a while, away from the heat of his flat and the smell of heavy soup cooking. I longed to breathe fresh air again, to see fields and animals instead of people. I was tired of people and their inner lives, and I was most tired of thinking about my own. I would go to Normandy with Margaret to a small hotel in the village of Giverny. There we would walk along country roads in sunshine, look through a gate into Claude Monet's garden, scarlet poppies, marigolds, delphiniums, daisies, under arches of bright roses. We would sit beside his pool where pale and pointed water lilies lay and long willow branches touched the water. We would work again on our books. We hadn't thought of books since we left Sudbury. In my room at the Hotel Bordy, my work table faced a window. I saw peasants mowing hay on a quiet hill. The smell of new mown hay and the chirp of sun-drenched birds came in at the open window. I began once more to write. 3 days passed and a message came from Paris late at night. Gurdjieff had been injured in a motor accident. His condition was critical. He was lying unconscious in a hospital. When we arrived in Paris, he was already at home. He had fractured ribs, lacerations on his face and hands, and many bruises. There was a danger of internal injuries. "Is he conscious now?" "Oh, yes," they said, "and he wants the readings and meals to continue as usual. He came in for a little while after lunch. He'll be at dinner. 30 are coming." But the next day he was worse, and the doctors held out slight hope that he would live. We stayed that night in a small hotel near his flat, waiting for the telephone to ring. It never rang. On the third day he was seated again at his dinner table. His head was still a shining dome, smooth and high, but his face was a dark shadow. There were purple bruises on his lips, and he wore a piece of gauze around his throat to hide a wound. "I cannot eat," he said, "my mouth all cut inside." Painfully, with his lacerated fingers, he divided a trout, handed me a piece across the table. "You like?" he said. "Then take." For the rest of the meal he sat in silence. In his eyes was the same blind look he had when he played the prayer music. As we rose to leave, he got up too. He lifted his hands against his rib. "It hurts," he said. "Great suffering I have." I could only stand there looking at him. Before I could wish him well, he said, "I thank you. I wish for you all that you wish for me." Welcome, everyone. Yes, Mike Hayden, I'm just curious. I like Wales very much. I spend a lot of time there in Pembrokeshire, surfing, and then Brecon and Snowdon walking and all the other lovely walks around the place. So, yeah, I'm very fond of Wales. And Flibbity Gibbets, I'm glad you're doing well. I hope everyone else is too. And another few pages of Dorothy. He cured himself. No one knew how. He had refused X-rays and the medicines prescribed by doctors, yet his recovery was so complete that he looked younger after the accident than before, as if the shock had strengthened his whole organism instead of weakening it. In the late afternoon he sat immaculately dressed outside a cafe near his flat, with a Panama hat shading his eyes and his cane lying across the table in front of him, talking with pupils, drinking coffee, watching people pass. At other times he sat alone, speaking with no one, noticing no one, until at last he rose and, in the long dusk, through quiet, shuttered streets, walked slowly home. There, after resting for a while, he changed into a loose grey cashmere suit, open white shirt and soft kid slippers, gave instructions in the kitchen, then came to sit with us and listen to the reading of his book, looking from one face to another, recognizing yet withholding recognition. Oh yeah, definitely is IOP. And like I say in Gurdjieff Remembered, it's also recounted by the Bennets. At dinner he welcomed us as he had always done, talked of the same subjects in the same words, and as usual halfway through the meal placed on his head his tasselled magenta fez. It was good to know that he was recovering, and it was good to see and hear intimate small ceremonies repeated, the ritual of the toasts, the offering of bread or fish across the table in his hand. And as I sat observing, absorbing, rejoicing, I grew aware of a swelling sense of harmony that related everything within the room to everything else. Gestures, faces, voices, food. My thoughts vibrated in unison like a chord in music. I began to understand something that I longed to go on understanding. I wanted to achieve the I he had told me about. Long before his accident, Gurdjieff had said, "I cannot develop you. I can create the conditions in which you can develop yourself." For weeks I had fought against the conditions he created. I had been angry, impatient, judicial. But I had concealed these emotions. Raging inside, I had appeared outwardly calm. The habit of a lifetime, good manners instead of an effort to act honestly. It would have been better to burst forth in defence of what I thought unjust, to ask him point blank why I should sit through endless meals, eating food I neither liked nor wanted. That I had felt compassion or anxiety or even deep affection for him was beside the point. It was good to be concerned about him. It would have been better to have been concerned about myself, to have begun to change, to develop myself. Once he had spoken to me about my great aim. "I haven't any aim," I said. "What should my aim be?" He said, "Do you want to perish like a dog?" I answered, "Of course not." He didn't explain. He simply repeated what he had said before. Remember your I. Christmas 1948. Back in America, I told my children all that had happened to me in Paris. Gloria listened, holding her new son, Colin, in her arms. Before his birth, Gurdjieff had said, "Good that mother should worry for her child. He will be strong." And Jackie listened with 3-year-old Dolly sitting beside her. I had asked Gurdjieff Jackie's question, "How shall I introduce God to my baby?" His answer was, "All babies near God. Later, bring to me and I will tell." Gurdjieff had arrived in New York in time for Christmas. Instead of 50 pupils as in Paris, he now sometimes had 100 in his hotel apartment, often as many as 80 for dinner. He worked with them constantly, never resting, never sparing himself. At the same time, he was arranging for the publication of his book, All and Everything. Each night it was read aloud. Each night until 2 in the morning he played his music for us. After we left, he slept for 3 hours, then rose and drove down to the big bright markets at the end of the city to choose fresh food for the feasts of the coming day. He stayed in New York for 2 months, and when he went back to France, we followed him. It was May in Paris, but for us there was no spring. There was no time to notice horse chestnut trees blossoming in the Bois or illuminated fountains sparkling in the Place de la Concorde in the soft sweet night. There was time only to drive as fast as possible by the shortest route to Gurdjieff's flat in the Rue des Colonels Renard, a street with as little French distinction as a page in a dictionary. A flat without sunlight or a single flower, where the motionless air reeked of Asiatic cooking and the heat was almost unbearable. The contrast between Gurdjieff's strong, decisive bearing and the deep hollows in his face alarmed me. "I am very tired," he said. "I work too hard." "You should take a vacation," I said. "I have no time. Many people come from England to see me in these days. There is still much to do." Later he said, "I would like to go to Chamonix to hear water running. There I could sleep." Another month of pupils, meals and heat. Then one night he said, "We go to Chamonix tomorrow." He asked us to go along. 4 motor cars were crowded with pupils, with boxes of Russian croquettes, bags of croissants, melons, apricots, chocolate bonbons and big thermos bottles of black coffee. Gurdjieff drove his car all the way, leading the caravan. He used no maps, gave no directions. He simply said, "Follow me," and started off, stopping only to nap for half an hour by the side of the road when he could go no farther. In Chamonix, he wakened in the morning refreshed by the splashing, icy stream beneath his window. But his days were as active as in Paris, devoted to his work, his business affairs, and the responsibility of new young pupils. At the week's end, in spite of the cold, thin air, the healing pines and fresh snow winds from the mountains, he was still tired. I sat beside him on a bench outside the hotel the day we left Chamonix, watching the porters arrange luggage in the cars. At last I said, "May I tell you something, Mr. Gurdjieff? I wish I had met you 20 years ago. Today it's too late. I realize now that I am nothing, and it's the loneliest feeling in the world." He turned and looked at me. "Ah," he said, "you are no longer blind. Your eyes now open. You begin to see." He took some bonbons from his pocket, handed them to a porter passing by. I'd often see him do this and always wondered why. "Why do you offer candy to people?" I asked. "And why does everyone look pleased? Policemen, waiters, strangers, and that young mother last night sitting in the salon with her baby. Why?" "I do not know if I will see again that mother, but if I do, she will not forget me. She will remember the surprise of bonbons for her baby. Perhaps she will need help, and I not be a stranger. You understand?" "Yes, I understand about the mother, but the policeman?" "The policeman stopped me. I did not wish to wait. I gave bonbons, and he was very surprised, so he let me go. That is being clever man." Imagine that. The way of the sly man. You get pulled over for speeding, and you say, "Have a bonbon, officer. See ya." But yes, IOP, VXV, follow me. And that's all the instruction you get. And I think, again, in Joseph Aziz's book, he documents very nicely the difference. And as you read all the different books and accounts, the different way of teaching that Gurdjieff does early on in Russia, around between 1915 and 20, when Ouspensky's there, then the travelling, Caucasus, Essentuki, etc. That's documented in the Hartmans, then at the Priory, which there's much written about, and then later on in the Rue des Colonels Renard, and we read on the old channel the wartime meetings. They all have a very distinct and different approach to the system, the method, the ideas, and it's very interesting to think how we would do with each of those, right? But anyway, he was also an ill man, coughing in pain. This is Gurdjieff. Yet back in Paris, at his table, he still had room for all who came. pupils from England, Scotland, Switzerland, Austria, as well as America. To spare him we went less, but he noticed our absence and bade us come as usual. He had grown thinner, and the grey pallor had returned. One day at lunch he said, "I have worked hard. My book will soon be published for everyone to read. After I will go away, far, where I can rest." "But you will come back?" someone asked. He did not answer. Another said, "We will follow you wherever you go. We will go to California." Or will you go to California? It was the kind of question Gurdjieff never answered, but this time he looked at the speaker and smiled. "Perhaps California. Perhaps farther," he said. It was the middle of October, a gold, crimson country day when chipmunks rushed to gather nuts, and horses, free in pale gold fields, raced with each other and the wind. I left Giverny to see Gurdjieff in his cafe in Paris to say farewell until we should meet on the boat that was to take us all to America on the 20th. He was sitting alone. "You take coffee?" he said. For a moment I didn't speak. Then, when the coffee came, I said, "You are not coming on the boat with us after all?" "No, perhaps later." We sat in silence. Finally I said, "Mr. Gurdjieff, the I which I am trying to develop, is this the soul that survives after death?" He waited so long that I wondered whether he had heard me. Then he said, "How long you have been with me?" "Almost 2 years," I said. "Too short the time. You not able to understand. Use the present to repair the past and prepare the future. Go on well. Remember all I say." Wow, that's powerful, isn't it? Use the present to repair the past and prepare the future. Go on well. Remember all I say. I did not press him. He looked so ill. "You should take better care of yourself," I said. "What are you doing for your cough? Does something hurt you?" He moved slightly in his chair, and for the first time I heard from him a sound like a groan. "I must take habit of pain," he said. Then he held out his hand, and I said goodbye and left him sitting there alone in the shrill sunlight. Sea change. I never saw Gurdjieff again. He died in Paris 2 days after we landed in New York, and so, scarcely before it had begun, a great experience ended. Whatever I may have learned about his work during the 2 years I knew him might, as time passed, grow hazy in my mind. But what I felt when I was in his presence, whether he spoke or sat in silence, I would remember clearly always. Those feelings live forever that are born in the soul's heart. Gurdjieff was gentle with my soul. It was a soul that had not grown up as I grew up. It had been timid but trusting. Often it had been betrayed, but it had not been murdered. Nana had found it first, and she too had been gentle with it. Enrico had loved, moulded, sustained and protected it. Gurdjieff gave it courage. From his mysterious and conscious. Gurdjieff gave it courage. From his mysterious and conscious world he guided it with the kind of understanding he called objective love, the love of everything that breathes, and it responded with unlimited trust, the highest type of love there is, I think, in this immediate and unconscious world. Nothing is so great or so true as the trusting love of a child. It doesn't matter whether he has understood your words or not. It is the way they are spoken that matters, and the way they are spoken creates in the child the love and trust he returns to you. This is the emotion that Gurdjieff and the conditions he created in me. I can repeat our conversations, interpret his silences, describe his appearance, define his doctrine, yet I can only give the slightest indication of the change that took place in me after knowing him. I was aware before he died of this process of active and increasing change. His death, instead of ending the process, accelerated it. And then one day I understood what had been happening. I had transformed something in myself. The change was me. A mystery is something that cannot be expressed, something beyond human comprehension. Man is a mystery. The cosmos is a mystery. Man in relation to the cosmos is a mystery. Everything is a mystery and everything is a paradox. To understand this takes more than human comprehension, and more than human comprehension means to know. Gurdjieff knew. He knew from his being, as he called it, and he knew all the time. I know only for an instant at a time. That instant is a spark of understanding. It belongs to the person of my essence. During those instants I am aware of a division of identity, a separation between my essence person and what I have always called myself. When those moments are past, they do not become simply memories like other memories. Something else raises and widens and deepens the perceptions. The substance of that something I do not know. All I know is that it is a substance. It is not merely an idea. Thus far have I gone. What is to come next is, for the present, another mystery. All my time is not spent in pondering these things, nor are my thoughts always on eternity or death. But I am actively aware of everything today instead of passively aware as in the past. I can see each feather on a bird that flies by. It doesn't just fly by. I have been told that I am simply using my 5 senses. I am, as always, but the knowledge that I am doing it belongs to that second self. Therefore I can live in splendor in a little house beside a walnut tree in Maryland, where everything I touch or hear or see has its reverberations in that world where no one lives except those who have also been as fortunate as I. Early this morning I went out into the flowering woods behind our house to think out an ending for this book. I was alone. No one passed. The fragrance of uncurling violets, the nursery pink and white of dogwood blossoms, my rustling footsteps in the leaves. All this young spring I felt, and more than 50 other springs beside, with gratitude to every one I have known, and an aspiration to love everything that breathes. Riderwood, Maryland, April 1951. And that ends who was it again? It ends Dorothy Caruso's accounts, and so yes, IOP, it certainly is an effect in reflection. It's rather beautiful, isn't it? And if you want to read the whole book, it's Dorothy Caruso, A Personal History. And now we come back to Margaret Anderson, chapter 10, Every Man is an Island. During our last years with Gurdjieff, I was astounded to discover that all my old problems and rebellions had again become rampant. I was so haunted by my self-dissatisfactions, my self-accusations, that I feared I might never uncover their cause, or, even if I did, never discover their cure. My nights were troubled by these fears, and I often wakened after a long dream of having fled the hounds of heaven through all the hours of sleep. The definite words that haunted me were these: "Happy is he who has a soul, happy is he who has not, but grief and sorrow to him who has the conception and does not accomplish it." As usual, when one is full of self-recrimination, it is all too human to concentrate on the shortcomings of others. I must have been insufferable as I preached to my friends what I should have been accusing in myself. "We talk," I said, "but nothing happens. None of you wants to move quickly. We would like to benefit by Gurdjieff, you say, if we can have him in small doses when we want it. With such an attitude, there's nothing to do but let the thing go by. It isn't a thing to be taken as one likes. One has to stretch towards it with all one's strength, or not get it. You can count yourself fortunate if you can get some of it as it goes by. It doesn't wait. You have to do the waiting and the watching and the effort, or you'll be left behind. Your center of gravity has to be switched from life to this other thing. If you have a negative attitude, you let it drift by, hoping that someday I'm not at home in the negative attitude. I come out of it crushed, obsessed by the conviction that I am a part of something else. that I must try to stop adjusting to the status quo. You have to make 10 times your normal effort, and even then you can only get as much as your cell intelligence permits. You have to be always on tiptoe, ready to sprint ahead. Fortunately, having finally learned enough about the mote and the beam situation to realize that what I was preaching to others I was not practicing myself, I decided that I must talk with Madame de Salzmann and ask her to help me. I had always found her approachable, and I felt that she understood above anyone else certain things in a certain realm, that realm where, if you had progressed sufficiently with Gurdjieff, he could communicate with you, almost without words. I have always found it difficult to talk with Gurdjieff, I told her. I have so much awe of him that such an informality seems to me to touch upon irreverence. I know, she said, but perhaps you can find someone in the group you can trust and talk with him as you aren't able to talk with Mr. Gurdjieff. I trust you, I told her, and I'm determined not to regard you with such awed admiration that I can't speak. I trust you even to understand my rebellions. She laughed and quoted the beginning lines of My 30 Years' War. Quote, "Reality is your greatest enemy." Then she asked, "What do you want to say?" "May I explode?" I said, "just this once. I may never need to again." "Of course," she said. So I began. That's a funny question, isn't it? May I explode? I imagine she's going to go on a rant. "May I explode?" I said, "just this once. I may never need to again." "Of course," she said. So I began. "My suffering can be reduced to one essential rebellion," I said. "I cannot give up all my time to Gurdjieff's work. It makes all other work impossible. I want to write. I think I have special and interesting things to say, but there's no use trying to say them if I haven't the time to put them into form, the only device that will give them value. In other words, art." She said nothing but sat quietly waiting. I summoned all my force and tried to put my problem into clear words, my necessity to be in a state before I could produce anything creative, and the torture of interrupting such states because your conscience tells you that you should be doing something more important. "How often," I said, "I remember Gurdjieff's statement that everyone's personal data is as different from every other person's as his fingerprints, and that no one understands the subjective states of another. As I see it, every man is an island. My island is that place where I'm free to live without interruption in my states. I can never write decently unless I'm allowed this concentrated condition. I can never talk well unless I can first enter into a kind of trance. Oh, not what psychics call trance, you understand, just a special state, and prolong it until the creative mood arrives. A period of concentrated life must be given to a book, or there will be no book. It's like playing the piano. I gave that up long ago, but the other day I was alone for a whole afternoon, and I touched the piano again and played on and on. 4 hours later, when people came in, I looked at them and couldn't see them clearly. Everything in the room was in vibration, and I felt that I was floating in the air. My eyes were burning, my face was smiling and wouldn't stop. I could only look at the blurred faces around me as if they had no right to speak to me, to recall me from a world they couldn't enter because they had never lived in it. With writing, it's the same phenomenon. The slightest interruption, the slightest diversion makes it impossible to preserve the necessary state. Once you have entered it, and thoughts have begun to find their form, it is agony to be recalled, to be forced back into the broken vibrations of ordinary life. All creation stops. You lose all the thoughts and emotions you would have had. These strangled emotions can never be revived. Once your self-hypnosis has been broken, you can never remember what it was all about. It's no use to remind me of Gurdjieff's words. Once even I was sick man for art. I remember them all too well. I've tried to give up my states. I've tried, as Orage urged, to spit out a book instead of pondering over it, but it doesn't work. Oh, it can be done, but with what result? Such a book will be a failure, mediocre like thousands of others that command no art attention because they have been written with no art intention. All right, I can say, then don't write books, but that's the only kind of work I know how to do. If you're a person with a business job, if you have a career or profession, Gurdjieff doesn't say, give up your job. On the contrary, he says, do your job, but give my work first place. Well, I can't. If Gurdjieff's work is to take first place in my life, all the rest will have to be given up. It can't be accomplished in second place. It will have no quality. I was talking so fast and so fiercely that I didn't stop to gauge my listener's attitude. I can tell you just how it is, how these states happen. I remember a late afternoon in La Canette when I was listening to the radio. Flagstad was singing Un Rêve, Grieg, I think, and as I listened I was looking out the window at an olive tree. Its leaves were barely stirring in the still air. They're not silver, I said to myself as the song went on. They're white gold, like my bracelets. And at once I was in a state of dream that matched Grieg's dream. The spell continued long after the song ended, and before night came, I had begun my new book. You see, I finished, you must give your life to a book before, during and after its writing, through all its revisions. If I must give up my self-induced moods, I will have nothing to write about. I'll lose all the thoughts and feelings that make a good book. When I stopped, there was a long pause. Then I heard her say, Margaret, you exaggerate. Suddenly I was as quiet as she was. Then I thought, perhaps I do. She said, why do you want to have thoughts and feelings like everyone else's? I wait for the time when you say to me will be different from what everyone else says to me, authentic, your own. This so startled me and incensed me that I had no breath to answer. A new anger seized me. But I'm not saying what everyone else says, I raged to myself. What I'm saying is authentic, and it's interesting. I've always had high standards of interest, and I know that most of the people who talk to you couldn't write a good book to save their lives. Like a drowning man, I watched a reel of my ideas unrolling before my eyes. I seemed to have hours before me in which to say all I wanted to say, but I said it silently to myself, as one talks to oneself in fever. How can you imagine that the state of art can be created out of a divided energy? That you can give your total strength to Gurdjieff's work and make a book out of what's left over? How easily do you think a writer comes upon thoughts and emotions in form and therefore worth recording? Don't you remember Orage's words? Merely to convey thought is not an art but a craft. It's not if not a trade. Over and above the desire to communicate thought, there is for the artist as writer the desire to make it prevail in the minds of others. In short, art is a means of power. To express himself is not enough. He wishes to impress himself. Readers feel towards him the repulsion as well as the attraction of the snake for the bird. Power, they instinctively feel, is there, and they are afraid of it. Style is only the device adopted by great writers to make their power more attractive. Style is power made gracious. We must write as if Homer and Demosthenes were to be our judges, as if our lives depended upon their approval. All perfection is the fruit of sacrifice. Art is perfect when it seems to be nature. Do you think Orage spit out that passage? Of course not. Such things can't be done. The sacrifice demanded is the sacrifice of other activities. Think of Proust. What a good thing that he was ill and had to shut himself up in a padded room. And think of the scientist who, when told he was going blind, said, Alors, j'aurai moins de distraction. And that's a really powerful thought there, isn't it? Because this was, when did this published first? 1962 first published. And so she says, the sacrifice demanded is the sacrifice of other activities. And of course, in today's modern world, if we've got our smartphone or our laptop, the activities are endless forever. And so it's maybe even more difficult. You have to shut it down or stop. And again, I do appreciate you all being here with me, because it's the same thing, isn't it? There are many other activities that one could be doing. And so I do very much appreciate your company and your attention. And if we want to awaken, as she just said there, has to be the main priority in life. Otherwise, what does Jean de Salzman say? You can't do the Gurdjieff work with what's left over. Or I think she actually said you can't write a book with what's left over, but you could definitely invert those two things. And this is what happens when you really get intensely focused on it. It sort of overtakes everything. And, well, it is what it is, But I'll carry on. But of all these violent musings, I said not a word. Instead, as they raced through my mind, I was conscious that other thoughts were accompanying them, and they in turn made me suspect that I was discussing the wrong subject matter. Simultaneously, I was saying, what does all this matter to the silent person I'm talking to? As she listens, she has been thinking of something else, something important for me and for all the others who talk to her. All this time she has been preoccupied with a question. Will the gesticulating person beside me never stop suffering in vain and begin, before it is too late, to become what she might become? Or will she go on merely writing interesting books and listening to beautiful music? Surely she will soon come to know that that isn't enough. I don't know how long we sat in silence, or how long I had been imagining what she was thinking, but at last I said, I realize that what I've been describing is a state of frenzy, as Pythagoras said, and as Gurdjieff taught, to make art is to use that finer energy that should be used for development. Still she waited, so I went on. I realized that I must now do something else, that something else I've been working at for so many years without understanding how to live it. She smiled at me. I will try, I said. I will do whatever you say. During the long summer that followed this conversation, I was given special work to do. Simple, very difficult, or not too difficult exercises, repeated over and over, and at intervals changed. I began like a child who has blindly accepted a task. But how will I know when I have accomplished something? I asked Jean de Salzman. I can only tell you, she said, that you will know. This time I had no rebellion against the phrase which in its words said nothing. I believed that if I continued to work as I was told to, I would come upon that certain and different knowing. During these months I thought a great deal about Gurdjieff's teaching regarding man's suggestibility, his self-hypnotization, and one morning I wakened as if I had lived a long lifetime in the night. I was saying, I am dehypnotized. I may not have to lose myself all the time now. I believe I am really dehypnotized. And another night, after reading again all the old wonderful abstractions, I was unable to sleep. So deep was my realization that they now meant less to me than before. I had considered them my special portfolio, my only possible relation, I thought, to the Gurdjieff super-knowledge. Now I realize that the kind of knowledge Gurdjieff had tried to teach me was the kind of realization I had just had, the emptiness of words and ideas until they have been incorporated into a process, knowledge turned into being. I thought, perhaps I have finished forever with my need to feed on purely mental food. These experiences, these moments of perception, seemed to me authentic. My new vision of myself was that my former life of ardor and frenzy was something made of paper. As soon as I noticed that I was listening to music quite differently, always conscious that I wasn't completely lost in it, and that I didn't need to listen to it all the time. Surely this, I said, is part of that process by which, according to Gurdjieff, we gradually emerge from the self-hypnosis under which we all live. I told these things to my patient listener. Yes, she said, perhaps they are authentic experiences, but that was all she would say. And then one morning I had that flashing vision of the life of the soul which I described earlier. Again I sought out Jean de Salzman. This then is the process which is higher than taking thought. This is what you meant when you said, "You will know." Am I right? Yes, she answered. This shows a growth in your understanding. What you have seen is absolutely right. This is inner vision, truth. This is to see. But be careful. You see at those moments, and something may remain of that understanding, but it will be right only when you see it all the time, and that will be an impulse not to continue in the same way until now. It will give you a need to change further, to go further in that achievement. And so this is the last chapter and the last few pages. And yeah, we come to the end of Margaret Anderson's memoir of Gurdjieff. It's been very enjoyable, very insightful, and of course very different to the other books we read. But of course it is, because it's a different person. The final chapter, chapter 11, Death of a Mage. It was in Paris at the American hospital on October the 29th, 1949, that death came to Gurdjieff. He had intended to sail on the 20th for New York, where he would spend Christmas, and we were going on the same boat. But he became ill and had to postpone his trip. Instead of changing to a later sailing, we were advised to go on ahead and be in New York to welcome him. We arrived on the 27th. 2 days later, Solita, who had stayed on in Paris, cabled, "Gurdjieff died this morning." A few days later, her letter came. October the 30th, Sunday, midnight. We are all nearly in despair. Yesterday and today, my birthday, and the days to come are the worst in my life. He's wearing his best suit bought for the American trip. He is lying on a divan covered to the throat with a pale couverture which is piled with red roses, pink orchids, white flowers. On either side of his head are two enormous bouquets of violets. The chapel is lighted with candles. His face is like a statue's. Yesterday he looked alive still. A slight smile made him seem so. His skin had a most curious lavender tinge. Today he is darker. The smile has gone. He's already far away. The eyes have begun to sink. The lips are in a grave line, though not quite stern. Perhaps it was the taking of the death mask that changed him, but I think not. He looks as if he had just said, "Now I go away with all my secrets and my mystery. My work is finished here." All day for 2 days and all night last night and still tonight, the people stream to the hospital, stand in line to go in and see him. They stand in the most complete silence I have ever known and just stare at him. Nearly all are crying. He died at 10:30 in the morning yesterday. I had been telephoning for his news at 10 and was told that he was the same. I was in the hotel yesterday when R rang up to say he was dead. As soon as I could move, I went to Neuilly and was told that we could see him as soon as he had been taken to the chapel. Although he had seemed to be sleeping for hours before he died, the doctor had raised his eyelids and said that Gurdjieff looked back at him and was conscious. A most curious phenomenon. 4 hours after his death, his forehead and neck were still very warm. The doctor said he couldn't understand it. On Friday, Madame de Salzman had spoken to him in Russian. He did not reply, but lifted his hand and held it out for her to take. She has been absolutely superb. At the service yesterday, she sat near his head with white face, closed eyes from which the tears slowly flowed. Today at the service, a Russian intones the prayers. His assistant sings the responses. We all hold a lighted taper in our right hands and just gaze and gaze. The chapel is too small to hold all the people. We crowd together to make room until we are touching the funeral couch. Those who cannot enter stand outside and listen. Then, when the service is finished and we go out, the crowds who are waiting pass in. Of course, he is never alone. Several people volunteer each night to watch. On Wednesday, he will be taken to the Russian church, and at 11 on Thursday will be the High Requiem Mass. At 12, we all go to Fontainebleau for the enterrement. In the meantime, there will be a Mass every afternoon for the people who heard late of his death, especially for the English who will come. I think he would be proud of the behaviour of all his people. The grief is terrible, silent, and has a really objective quality of dignity. Of my own grief I will not speak. It is a small part of the common catastrophe. I shall always be grateful to those powers that allowed me to be here to see him before he went away from the planet Earth, but I shall never be able to describe the noble beauty of his dead faith. November the 2nd, midnight. This is Thursday, and at 6 o'clock we left him 6 feet deep in the cold ground at sunset, the coffin still uncovered. The last of him I saw, and it was not he, was a long pale brown box with a golden cross at the head, a few roses some desperate person had thrown in with the handfuls of earth each of the hundreds had dropped in accordance with the Russian custom. But back to Monday, at the chapel of the American hospital, he had turned to grey stone and looked even more at peace. Jane's English group had arrived in the night, direct from the Gare. At 4 a.m. the French group took over. Streams of people came and went all night, as they did all day. I can't imagine what the American hospital thought of all this, the hundreds of pilgrims who came and went away all through the icy, frosty nights. Tuesday. I'm just back from the chapel. I sat by his side near his face for 2 hours. A small choir came from the Russian church and sang the responses. The chief priest in the old tradition, robe, silver cross and a chain, long black hair and beard, liquid black eyes and a honey voice. There were new flowers over the titular silk brocade. Someone had made a tiny bouquet of red roses and late yellow daisies. Gurdjieff's face today Gurdjieff's face today was greyer, and the skin is tighter over the immense intelligence of his skull. Wednesday, un Freud de loup, whatever that means in French. Oh, never to see that smile again, never to hear him say, well, no matter what, the mise en bière. I couldn't quite go to the hospital to see him put into the box, and as I found out later, I wouldn't have been allowed to, only the men of the family. I went to the Russian church at 4 and waited there till nearly 6 before he was brought. 6 men carried him in, dim, lovely lights, many flowers which had arrived early, vested priests and small choir for the services. The church was crowded even for that small ceremony, all golden under the incense-smoke dome. The catafalque, whatever that is, the catafalque, was covered with a large black cloth embroidered with silver. Not a sound ever issues from any gathering of his people, neither a footstep, a cough, a rustle, or a breath. A remarkable quality of silence which is so rare as to be noted as unique. Don't believe in those last words, records, as no one thought he would die until he was so weak that he never spoke again, only held out his hand. The last day. This morning at 11:30 the High Mass at the Russian Cathedral. There had been no veil permitted last night, so he had been alone until the church opened. Candles, flowers, the voices of 5 white and gold-robed priests, a cantor with a divine breaking voice. How beautiful is the Russian language! The church was packed, not only with those we know, but by hundreds of his followers whom we never saw, whom I had never seen in all my years near him. After the chanting and prayers and singing were finished, for an hour everyone passed by his coffin, one by one from the right. Each mourner, streaming with tears, made a genuflection at his head, stepped up to the icon at his feet, kissed it and walked to the left. Each, unself-conscious, took his or her private and sorrowful farewell to him, and a ceremonious simplicity that tore one's heart open ever wider than before, if possible. Then everyone went away to breathe, have a drink of coffee, and at 2:00 we came back to the church. The crowd stood along the street to watch him brought out and put in the great funeral carriage, his flowers placed on top. The family rode with him. The hundreds of others rode behind in the cortege, in many private cars and 4 enormous autobuses. The streets were jammed, closed to traffic for blocks around the Russian church, and other crowds gathered to watch the spectacle. I went with some of the rich, silent English and followers of Ouspensky through the old familiar roads, streets, towns, turnings, forest, to Avon. In a cruel, icy, sunny wind, we walked by the hundreds through the cemetery gates, following him to the family plot. I saw the grave torn open in the rocky, watery ground, deep, deep, horribly deep. The porters let him down into it. A great sigh came from the people, the only sound they had made when they were together since he died. The priest came to the rescue with his chanting. Later everyone passed by the terrible hole, cast a pinch of earth down onto the box, knelt, made the sign of the cross, and passed on. It was over. He had disappeared from us, forever. And hello there, Voldemar. Mixed emotions, my friend. Happy to see you, but a bit sad to be reading again of Mr. Gurdjieff's passing. But welcome, Voldemar. And I do hope to be, reading more and more moving forward. And the final section, later. 2 days before he was taken to the hospital, he called in 4 people who happened to be sitting in the salon through the night and just looked at them for a long time, saying not one word. They believe he was saying goodbye. The preach at the Russian church stated that there has never been such a funeral before, except charlatans, whoever that is, charlatans, that he has never seen such mass grief or such a concentration of attitude on the part of the mourners. Even the undertaker, who had never seen Gurdjieff before he saw him dead, broke down at the grave and wept, just from the vibrations, I dare say. The French group is going to keep the apartment as a sort of shrine to which we may go. The group dances and readings are continuing. Jean de Salzman goes to America in December. She will carry on his work as best she can, and I suppose we will all help her. We have all so pledged. The end. So it's always quite sad to read the final chapter of Gurdjieff's life, his passing, but it's also inspirational, I would say, isn't it? Because, of course, anyone that come to the work after his passing, is in the same boat as us. So we are still in the same position as anyone who's ever heard the name Gurdjieff, right? We're all in the same position to do our own work, our own efforts, conscious intentional suffering and conscious efforts. I've not said that right, but you know what I mean. And yeah, that's all that counts really, isn't it, in the Gurdjieff scheme? And so, yeah, rather sad ending, but it's wonderful to be with you all and to be able to share it with you. It's nice to see all the same names in the chat, and like I say, the community continues. Next, we're going to read Rudyard Kipling's Kim, and I will be uploading more sort of new videos and talks about I suppose, the four ideals and different talks about it. I've started reading the Bible. I've picked out my Bible in 1 year. And so there's a short reading from the Old Testament, New Testament, and then a psalm or a proverb. And I'm doing quite well. The first 8 days I've kept up. And it takes me back to my first ever religious study, which was the Bible, before I went on and studied all the other traditions. So I'm drawing a lot of interesting connections, syncretic threads. And so, of course, I'll be sure to share them all with you in case you may find them interesting as well and educational and entertaining, or maybe not so much, but we'll be here together. Even if it is just an upload, you know, there's like a connection. And of course, we'll be back live to read Kim. And then I think I'll do a poll with the options. I think my feeling is Women of the Rope, The Hartmans, Our Life with Mr. Gurdjieff, Czeslaw Czechovic, Gurdjieff, A Master in Life. I can't remember the other one that we could read, but maybe there'll just be 3 in the poll if I can't remember the other one. But again, new channel, lots coming up. And that's it, I suppose. That's it for now. I think tomorrow we're going to read a short essay at the same time. Tomorrow night at 9:30, the essay from... I can't remember where it's from. The Sun, Shining Sun. There's a website with lots of Gurdjieff information in it. The something Sun. Anyway, the essay is called Taking Gurdjieff Seriously, and it has a wonderful, the final paragraph is really powerful about, not taking Gurdjieff too seriously. I may even have it here. Spiritual Sun, I've remembered. Let me see if I've still got it here. Yeah, here we go. The Spiritual Sun School, and this is the final paragraph. The Gurdjieff work without the tales risks falling short of the mark. Reading the tales without engaging in inner work renders the book merely a frustrating curiosity. The synergy between the two has real power to transform. And there's another quote about, between dictatorialism and lapseness, and how you need to find the balance in that. And yes, Voldemar, I believe you're right. He's still with us. Early on in the reading, Voldemar, before you would have come in, it's either Margaret Anderson or one of the women that she quotes, but says that, in the final years of his life, he almost taught through his being, his vibration, his energy. And so if you read Beelzebub's tales regularly, as he prescribed us to, I feel you're still, receiving that energy through the words, as I know you're, doing, Voldemar. But that's enough rambling for me for one evening. I hope you've enjoyed the reading of Margaret Anderson's The Unknowable Gurdjieff. We'll be back tomorrow for the short essay. And then I think probably Sunday next week, we will start some Kipling. And for now, thank you for being here and sharing that with you, with us, with me, together. Take care, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you tomorrow or whenever the next time is. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon.